The most dangerous relationships you will ever encounter, they don't start with cruelty.
Right.
Because, I mean, if they did, you would just leave, right? The threat would be totally obvious. Your nervous system would sound the alarm and you'd just walk away.
Exactly. You'd be out the door.
Yeah. But instead, the relationships that cause the most profound, like, lasting psychological harm, they begin with absolute intoxicating perfection.
It's the ultimate Trojan horse of human intimacy, truly.
Right. And so today we're going to look at the terrifying psychological architecture and the neurobiology of why that perfection makes them almost impossible to escape.
Because when a threat is wrapped in the illusion of perfect, bespoke love, your defense mechanisms, well, they never even activate.
Wow, yeah.
In fact, your defenses are actively dismantled by the very person who is about to cause the harm. We have an extensive body of clinical, psychodynamic, and neurobiological research in front of us today. And, I mean, what it reveals is just staggering.
It really is. And, we need to set the stakes for this deep dive right up front. If you're listening to this right now, whether you're currently confused by a relationship, or maybe you're healing from a brutal breakup, or honestly just fascinated by the darker corners of human behavior. Right. Our mission today is not just to analyze toxic people. Exactly. Labeling someone a narcissist or an abuser, that's only half the equation. And frankly, it's kind of the less important half.
Yeah, I agree.
This is an expedition into the hidden wiring of your own nervous system. We're going to map your attachment patterns, your biological vulnerabilities, and those deep existential human needs that just keep this whole cycle spinning.
But to do that justice, we really have to look at this phenomenon through a specific lens.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just list bad behaviors.
Right.
We have to constantly operate on 3 levels. First, we have to look at the surface, which is the observable behaviors. Like, what does this manipulation actually look like in your living room?
Or in your text message history, right? And the daily reality of your life.
Exactly. And then second, we have to dive into the psychological layer. What are the unconscious defense mechanisms operating beneath those behaviors? And that's both in the person causing the harm and in the person receiving it.
Okay. Let's unpack this, because then there's the third layer, which the research points to as like the most vital one, which is the existential level.
Yes. The existential level is where the true invisible chains are forged. We have to confront those deep-seated fears of abandonment, the fragility of identity, and, well, the fundamental human need for belonging.
Because if we don't look at all 3 of these levels simultaneously, we're really just describing symptoms.
Exactly. We aren't understanding the disease.
Sure.
And you cannot cure a disease you don't understand.
So let's start at the very beginning of the timeline, the trap itself. Clinical literature refers to this as the idealization phase.
But in modern vernacular, everyone knows it as love bombing.
Right, love bombing. And on the surface, this looks like an accelerated, incredibly intense period of absolute closeness.
It's the constant communication.
Yeah, the grand declarations of future plans, like very early on. But I was reading through the sources on this, and what really stands out is that true love bombing isn't just about, buying expensive gifts or taking you on lavish dates.
No, not right.
It's an emotional mirroring that feels incredibly bespoke.
You're touching on the exact mechanism that makes this so lethal.
Yeah.
Mirroring is not just agreeing with you. It is the systematic reflection of your own deepest traits.
Oh, wow.
Your desires, your unhealed wounds. They are perfectly calibrated and reflected back to make you feel understood.
So, like, you might mention in passing that you've always felt like an outsider in your own family.
Right. And then the next day, they deliver this perfectly crafted monologue about how they have spent their entire life searching for a kindred spirit, someone who understands that exact, specific flavor of loneliness.
It feels like magic. It really does. It feels like after years of wandering in the dark, someone has finally turned the lights on and truly seen you.
But the psychological revelation here, and this is a chilling one, is that they aren't actually connecting with you.
Wait, really? Not at all.
No, they are not seeing you at all.
Yeah.
What is happening on a psychodynamic level is that they're interacting with an internal snapshot.
A snapshot?
Yes. When a person with severe pathological traits, particularly what we call cluster B personality structures, like narcissistic or borderline pathologies,
right,
when they meet you, they take a psychological photograph of you. They then take that image into their own mind and essentially edit it.
Like photoshopping it.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
They airbrush away any of your complex human messiness, your flaws, your independent needs, and they transform you into this flawless, two-dimensional avatar.
So they fall in love with a fantasy they've basically just painted over your face?
They project the fantasy of a perfect, unconditionally loving, and essentially maternal figure onto you.
Maternal figure.
Yeah. And when we use the word maternal in the psychodynamic sense, we're referencing the foundational work of self-psychology and object relations.
Okay, right.
Theorists like Heinz Kohut and Otto Kernberg mapped this out beautifully. They found that individuals with severe narcissistic pathology suffered profound early developmental arrests.
Meaning their childhoods were...
Their core emotional needs in childhood were either systematically unmet or they were used merely as extensions of their own caregivers.
So they just weren't allowed to develop a stable sense of self.
Exactly. They're carrying a profound, terrifying internal emptiness. So to escape that internal void, they project their desperate need for regulation onto an idealized external object.
Which is you.
Which is you. You aren't really a romantic partner to them in this phase. You are the newly cast actor assigned to play the role of their savior,
Wow.
a perfect parent, the entity that will finally make them feel whole.
You know, listening to you describe this projection, my mind immediately goes to a Hollywood movie set.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. It's like you're walking onto a backlot, and from the front, it is this perfect, idyllic, beautiful home. The porch is inviting, the paint is fresh, the lights are warm. You think, like, I could live here forever.
Yeah, you feel totally safe.
But if you walk just a few feet to the side and you look behind the facade, you realize there's just wooden scaffolding.
Right.
There's no plumbing. There's no foundation. It's a completely hollow structure built entirely for the camera.
And the absolute tragedy of that movie set is that the victim moves all of their emotional furniture into it, believing it to be a real home.
Oh, that's devastating. But, you know, I have to push back on this, or at least ask the question that I know anyone listening who has survived this is just screaming right now.
Please go ahead.
If it's a movie set, if it's an avatar they've created, do they know they're faking it? Like, are they sitting there consciously thinking, I'm going to build a fake house and trick this person into loving me?
It's a critical distinction to make, and understanding it is vital for the survivor's healing. For the vast majority of individuals with narcissistic pathology, this is not a conscious Machiavellian performance.
Yeah.
They are not twirling their mustaches. They genuinely experience this idealization phase as incredibly real.
So they believe their own illusion.
They absolutely must believe it for their own psychic survival. Remember that internal fragmentation we just discussed?
Right, the emptiness.
Kernberg conceptualized narcissism as a highly rigid structural defense.
Yeah.
It relies entirely on the continuous affirmation from the outside world to prevent their ego from collapsing.
Collapsing into what?
Into terrifying feelings of worthlessness and shame. So when they are idealizing you, they are flooded with relief. They feel regulated. They feel safe.
Wow.
They need the fantasy to be real, just as much as a drowning person needs a life raft to be real.
And if we look at the existential layer, that is exactly why this phase is so intoxicating for you as the victim.
Yes.
The abuser is weaponizing your deepest, most fundamental human desires. I mean, we all have a baseline need for belonging, for validation, for unconditional positive regard. Absolutely. But if you have any unhealed attachment wounds of your own, maybe you had a dismissive parent or a history of feeling invisible, this intense, laser-focused attention doesn't register as a red flag.
No, it registers as a rescue. It feels like home.
You lower your weapons, you just hand over the keys to your emotional core, which makes the inevitable collapse of that movie set utterly devastating.
Because a movie set isn't built to withstand actual weather.
Right. No human being can perfectly embody an idealized two-dimensional avatar 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We get tired, we get cranky, we have a bad day at work.
We express a need that conflicts with their need.
And that simple human divergence from their script leads us directly into the second phase of the cycle.
The devaluation.
Yeah, the devaluation.
The transition from the idealization phase to the devaluation phase can cause profound psychological whiplash.
I can imagine.
The warmth, the mirroring, the constant validation is all abruptly withdrawn. On the surface level, we see the deployment of what the clinical literature calls the devaluation toolkit.
And the sources are very specific about how insidious this toolkit is. It's rarely just straightforward physical aggression or, like, overt yelling.
No, it's much more covert.
Because if someone just started screaming at you out of nowhere, you'd recognize they were unstable. You'd leave.
Overt rage does happen, but the most damaging tools in the kit rely on plausible deniability. The psychological warfare is subtle.
Right.
First, you encounter the weaponization of absence, the silent treatment.
Hmm.
Warmth is no longer freely given as a baseline of the relationship. It becomes highly conditional.
It's transactional.
Exactly. It is given as a reward for absolute compliance to the fantasy, or coldly withheld as a punishment for showing autonomy.
Then there is what the literature refers to as death by 1,000 cuts. I was reading the examples of this, and it is so recognizable. It's the backhanded compliments.
Yes.
Like you're at a dinner party, and they say, oh, I love how you just wear anything. You don't even care how you look.
Right, just a subtle dig.
Or they make a cruel, highly specific joke at your expense, and when you visibly react or express hurt, they immediately pivot and say, wow, I was just joking. You are way too sensitive.
That pivot is crucial because it immediately shifts the focus from their abusive behavior to your reaction to the behavior.
Ah, okay.
Another primary tool in this phase is triangulation.
Let's really dig into triangulation because I think a lot of people misunderstand it. It's not just cheating on someone, is it?
No, triangulation is much more structural. It is the deliberate, often subtle introduction of a third party into the relational dynamic to foster a sense of constant competition and insecurity.
A third part, like who?
It could be an ex-partner they suddenly start speaking highly of. It could be a coworker. It could even be a family member or a hypothetical standard. They create an intimacy cloud of competing admirers or alternative sources of supply.
But why do they do that? Why do they need this cloud?
To stabilize their own ego. If you are constantly off balance, constantly trying to prove that you are better than the ex or the coworker, you are pouring massive amounts of energy and attention into them.
So you're giving them what they want.
You are providing rich narcissistic supply. Furthermore, it preemptively devalues your critiques of them.
Yeah.
If you complain about their behavior, they can point to this cloud of admirers and imply, well, none of these other people have a problem with me. You are the defective one.
And this dynamic is especially terrifying when we look at covert narcissism. When most people hear the word narcissist, they picture the loud, boastful, arrogant person holding court at a bar, demanding everyone look at them.
The grandiose narcissist.
Right. But the sources highlight that covert narcissists use an entirely different, arguably more disorienting set of weapons.
Covert narcissism hides behind a mask of extreme modesty, altruism, or very frequently, chronic victimhood. Yes. They consistently position themselves as the uniquely wronged party in every single narrative. The world is always against them. Their exes were always crazy. Their bosses never appreciated their genius.
So when you try to bring up a grievance with a covert narcissist, you run headfirst into Darvo.
Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender.
Yeah.
It is a highly effective, primitive defense mechanism. You approach them and say, you know, it really hurt my feelings when you ignored me all night at the party.
Right.
First, they deny. I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't ignore you. Then they attack. You're always so needy and paranoid, it's exhausting.
Ouch.
And finally, they reverse victim and offender. I had a terrible day at work. I just wanted one peaceful night. And now you are ruining it by attacking me. I can't do anything right for you.
And within 60 seconds, you find yourself frantically apologizing to them for making them feel bad. Your original grievance is completely erased. It's a masterclass in psychological distortion. But let's look at the mechanism behind this shift. What actually triggers the devaluation? Why do they suddenly flip the switch from love bombing to this 1,000-cut warfare?
The trigger is simply your humanity. The moment you express an independent thought, set a boundary, or display a flaw, you deviate from that internal snapshot they took of you in phase one.
Right.
Think about how a healthy person views a boundary. In a secure relationship, a boundary is an invitation to deeper intimacy. It's me saying, here is how you can love me better.
Right. It's an instruction manual, not a threat.
But to the pathological personality, your boundary is an existential threat because you are supposed to be an extension of them. You're supposed to be the perfect maternal regulator.
Okay, I see.
When you act independently, you shatter their fantasy. You are failing your assigned role, and that failure threatens their psychic cohesion. They experience your independence as a profound betrayal.
The toll this takes on the victim's existential reality is just catastrophic because you remember the love bombing phase. You remember how perfect it was.
Yes. So when the devaluation starts, your brain naturally assumes, well, I must have done something wrong to lose that perfect love. You internalize the blame.
Always.
Your world begins to shrink. You start walking on eggshells, monitoring their moods, trying to figure out the exact alchemy of behavior that will bring the idealized version of them back.
And in doing so, the victim experiences a terrifying loss of what the clinical literature calls epistemic security.
Epistemic security.
Epistemic security is your fundamental trust in your own ability to perceive reality. You stop trusting your memory. You start secretly recording conversations or taking screenshots of text messages.
Not to use in court, but just to look at later in the bathroom to prove to yourself that you aren't going insane.
Yeah, exactly. It's just to anchor yourself to reality.
But I'm hung up on the logic of the abuser here. If they are so disappointed in you, if you have failed to be their perfect avatar and your boundary has shattered their fantasy, why do they stick around to torture you?
It's a great question. Like, why wouldn't a narcissist just leave, discard you immediately, and go find a new perfect target to love bomb?
If we look deeply at the internal world of the narcissist, the answer to that question reveals the true darkness of the pathology. They do not just leave because they need you present. They need you to act as a receptacle for their own toxic shame.
A receptacle, like a trash can?
Yes. They are entirely incapable of processing their own feelings of worthlessness, inadequacy, and self-loathing. They don't have the internal emotional scaffolding to sit with those feelings.
So they just pass it off.
So they must project them outward. They have to devalue you to elevate themselves. They literally need you to feel small, confused, and broken so that they can feel big, certain, and powerful.
Wow.
If they were to just walk away and be alone, they would have to sit in the silence with their own terrifying internal void. They use your emotional pain as a mirror to prove their own superiority.
Wow. That brings us to the underlying architecture of their brain. Because to fully grasp how someone can comfortably use their partner as a trash can for their shame, we have to explore the primitive defense mechanisms driving this behavior.
When psychoanalytic literature uses the term primitive, it is referring to defense mechanisms that develop in early infancy, long before a child has language or complex reasoning.
Okay.
Higher-level defenses, like rationalization or intellectualization, modify our perception of reality to make it more comfortable. Primitive defenses do not modify reality. They radically distort and obliterate it.
Let's start with the mood swings, because on the surface, this is one of the most bewildering aspects for a partner.
Yes.
The abuser can claim you are an absolute angel, the love of their life on Tuesday, and by Wednesday afternoon, you are fundamentally evil, selfish, and the cause of all their problems. There's just absolutely no middle ground.
That behavior is the outward manifestation of a primitive defense called splitting. Splitting stems from an inability to achieve object constancy.
Object constancy, right.
Yeah. Let me explain object constancy. In healthy psychological development, usually around the age of 2 or 3, a child learns that their mother can be deeply frustrating. She might say no to a toy or put them in timeout, but she is still the same loving, safe mother.
The child learns that good and bad qualities can exist in the same person simultaneously.
They integrate the two concepts. The world isn't black and white. But a mind fractured by early trauma or developmental arrest fails to achieve that integration.
So they can't handle the gray area.
Splitting operates as an active defensive compartmentalization. The ego literally splits its perception to prevent the catastrophic anxiety that would occur if hostile, angry feelings toward a caregiver contaminated the safe, idealized feelings.
I see.
So in the narcissist's mind, they have two distinct mental libraries for you. The all-good library and the all-bad library.
So when things are good, you are in the all-good library. You have no flaws.
But the moment you trigger them, by setting a boundary or just by having a different opinion, you are not just a good partner who made a mistake. You are immediately evicted from the all-good library and shoved entirely into the all-bad library.
There is no gray area.
None. And once you are in that devalued state, their perception of you is fundamentally altered. Any positive thing you try to do is viewed with intense suspicion, framed as manipulation or a trick.
That explains the amnesia-like quality of the arguments. I've heard so many survivors describe this. You can have a wonderful, loving, peaceful weekend getaway, and then on Sunday night there's a minor disagreement over where to get dinner. Suddenly the abuser's eyes go dark and they scream, "You have always been selfish. You've never cared about what I want." And the survivor's standing there thinking, "Are you kidding? We just spent 48 hours holding hands and laughing." But the abuser literally cannot access the memory of the good weekend while they are in the all-bad split state.
You're exactly right. The memories are entirely emotionally segregated. They aren't just lying to win an argument. Their current emotional state dictates their access to historical memory.
That is wild.
Another primitive defense, operating alongside splitting, is omnipotent control. This is the unconscious fantasy of having absolute power over others. It is a defense against feelings of profound helplessness or smallness.
Right.
By aggressively minimizing the partner's autonomy, dictating their reality and controlling their emotional state, the abuser maintains the illusion that they are entirely self-sufficient and untouchable.
But of all the primitive defenses we're looking at, the one that I found the most mind-bending, the one that really feels like psychological horror, is projective identification.
Yes.
The sources lean heavily on theorists like Melanie Klein and Thomas Ogden for this.
Yeah.
Can we slow down and really map this out? Because ordinary projection is pretty easy to understand.
Yes, ordinary projection is straightforward. If I feel deep, unacknowledged anger, but admitting I am angry threatens my self-image, I will unconsciously accuse you of being angry. I project my feeling onto you as a defense.
Right. I'm not mad. You're the one who's acting hostile.
Exactly. Projective identification is exponentially more insidious. It's not just projecting a feeling onto you. It is projecting a feeling into you.
Into you.
The abuser unconsciously coerces you through a highly attuned campaign of manipulative, confusing, and provocative behavior to actually feel and act out their disavowed emotions.
Okay, let me try an analogy here, because reading about this mechanism, I pictured it physically.
Let's hear it.
Imagine the abuser is carrying this massive, impossibly heavy, deeply toxic backpack. It is filled with their own unbearable shame, their rage, their feelings of being fundamentally defective.
Right.
They cannot bear the weight of it. It is crushing them. So instead of taking off the backpack and looking inside it, they forcefully shove that heavy backpack onto your shoulders.
It is very accurate visualization.
But it doesn't stop there. Now you are wearing the backpack. You are staggering and stumbling under the crushing weight of this sudden, intense toxicity.
Yes.
And as you are stumbling, the abuser stands back, points at you, and yells, "Look how weak and unstable you are. Look how crazy you're acting. I'm completely fine, but you are a mess."
What you've just described is what Thomas Ogden called the relational interpenetration of subjectivities.
Yeah.
You are literally carrying their emotional baggage, and they're judging you for it. The abuser feels a profound sense of relief because the shame and rage are now over there, located safely inside you.
They get to observe their own pathology from a safe distance.
Exactly. And you, the victim, are left feeling completely unhinged. You are asking yourself, why am I suddenly screaming? I'm not a violent person. Why do I feel this deep, agonizing sense of worthlessness?
You are feeling their feelings.
You have been emotionally hijacked. And this brings us to the existential core of the narcissist. We have to recognize that all of this grandiosity, the omnipotent control, the splitting, the projective identification, it is all a desperate, rigid shell covering a terrifying internal void.
Yeah.
They walk through the world in a state of hypervigilance. They view everyone, especially their intimate partner, as a potential source of humiliation.
The literature calls this a narcissistic injury.
Or, in severe cases, a narcissistic mortification. Mortification is the catastrophic collapse of their psychological defense mechanism.
When the mask slips completely.
When their false self is threatened, when you see through the mask or you expose their inadequacy, they experience emotional pain and dysregulation so intense it feels like psychological annihilation.
That's terrifying.
The devaluation, the cruelty, the projection, it is all a preemptive strike. They must destroy your credibility and your self-worth before you have the cognitive clarity to recognize their fundamental emptiness.
And once that partner has been entirely devalued, once they've been converted in the abuser's mind from like perfect, idealized avatar into what the literature calls a persecutory object, meaning you are now seen as the enemy, the system reaches a breaking point.
Yes.
The movie set has been burned to the ground. And that leads us to the discard.
On the surface, the discard is exactly what it sounds like. The abrupt, often shocking termination of the relationship. In overt narcissistic personalities, it can be highly dramatic.
Right.
Explosive rage, public humiliation, suddenly packing bags in the middle of the night and disappearing, often immediately parading a new partner.
But the covert discard is almost more chilling. It's the gray rock discard.
Yes. The covert abuser doesn't explode. They completely withdraw. They become entirely flat, emotionless, and unresponsive. They look at you with dead, shark-like eyes.
Ugh, that visual.
All the history, all the intimacy you shared is erased from their face. They treat you with the cold, bureaucratic detachment of an executive firing an employee they never particularly liked.
That specific behavioral shift, that sudden wall of ice, is so deeply traumatizing because it is designed to provoke a reaction.
Precisely. They want you to panic. When you inevitably cry, beg for an explanation, or express profound distress, The abuser points to your emotional reaction and uses it as justification for the discard.
They set you up.
They say, see, look how hysterical you are. You're unhinged. I have to leave this relationship for my own peace of mind. They deliberately manufacture a crisis so they can exit the relationship while firmly playing the role of the victim.
But here's the revelation about the discard that absolutely stopped me in my tracks while reviewing the sources. It's about when it happens.
Yes.
Logically, you would think a relationship ends when things are at their absolute worst, when you're both miserable, fighting constantly, and completely drained. But the clinical observation is that the final discard rarely happens then. It happens when the victim is at their best.
This is a deeply counterintuitive, devastating reality that survivors spend years trying to process.
Yeah.
The discard almost reliably occurs precisely when the partner is experiencing a resurrection of their own self-worth. It happens when you finally start therapy and find your voice. It happens when you get a major promotion at work or start building an independent social circle, or when you finally set a firm boundary and demand mutual respect.
But if they want a perfect partner, why would your success and strength trigger the end of the relationship?
Because your individuation is the ultimate threat to their absolute control. Remember the foundational dynamic. They need you to be a regulated, dependent extension of them, a receptacle.
Right, the avatar.
If you are strong, independent, and firmly rooted in your own reality, you are no longer a viable source of unquestioning narcissistic supply. You are threatening their omnipotence.
I see.
You are becoming a separate human being when you have the power to leave them. They must abort the shared fantasy and destroy the connection before you have the opportunity to reject them. It is a preemptive abandonment.
But the story doesn't end with the discard. Because eventually, almost like clockwork, the abuser returns. The cycle loops back into what is universally known as hoovering.
Named after the vacuum cleaner.
Right. They attempt to suck the victim back into the dynamic.
Hoovering is typically initiated when the abuser's alternative sources of validation, maybe the new partner, the new job, fail to perfectly regulate them. Or when they simply require reassurance that they still maintain godlike power over you.
And the invisible dynamics leading up to the Hoover are fascinating. They don't usually just show up with a boombox outside your window. It is preceded by narcissistic probing. It feels like a CIA-style intelligence-gathering operation.
Because despite their grandiosity and their cruelty during the discard, they are fundamentally terrified of rejection. A direct, firm rejection from you would cause that narcissistic mortification we discussed.
So they test the waters.
Very carefully. You will get a highly neutral, seemingly innocent text message out of nowhere. Hey, I saw a picture of a golden retriever today and thought of your dog.
Wow.
Or they will conveniently accidentally bump into you at a coffee shop they know you frequent.
They are pinging your radar.
They are gathering emotional intelligence to see if you are angry, indifferent, or still attached. They are checking to see if you have been adequately conditioned by the trauma to provide supply again without causing them a narcissistic injury.
And if that probe is successful, if you respond politely or show any emotional opening, they deploy the full Hoover. And this is where it gets incredibly confusing for the victim, because the Hoover looks exactly like accountability.
It does.
They return to love bombing. They offer sweeping, tearful apologies. They use the exact language you spent years begging them to use. I was in a dark place. I went to therapy. I finally see what I lost, and I know how badly I hurt you.
But existentially, what is happening is that the narcissist is trapped in an endless, tragic loop. They're unconsciously reenacting their unresolved childhood conflicts.
Reenacting how?
They are continually trying to separate from the maternal figure to prove their independence, which is the discard, but they are simultaneously terrified of losing her and being engulfed by the void, so they pull her back, which is the Hoover.
A repetition compulsion.
Yes. It has absolutely nothing to do with genuine reciprocal love for you as a human being.
Okay, so I have to stop here and ask a vital question. Because if someone is listening to this and they have never been through this cycle, they're probably thinking, well, if the victim knows they're being abused, if they've endured the silent treatments, the gaslighting, the agonizing pain of the cold discard, why do they take the abuser back?
It's the most common judgment.
Right. Why does a highly intelligent, capable, successful person walk right back into a burning building when the hoovering starts?
That is the most critical pivot of this entire discussion. The answer to that question is not psychological weakness. It is not codependency. It is not a lack of intelligence. And it is certainly not a lack of self-esteem.
What is it then?
The answer is hardwired neurobiology.
And that takes us from the architecture of the abuser's mind directly into the chemistry of the victim's brain. the neurobiology of trauma bonds.
On the surface level, survivors describe the aftermath of the discard not just as sadness, but as an intense, gravitational, almost supernatural pull to return to the abuser.
Yeah.
They describe the pain of separation as an unbearable physical agony in their chest. They literally feel like they are dying without the person.
And people looking from the outside are often highly judgmental. They say, just leave, block their number, have some self-respect. But let's look at the science of why just leaving is a biological impossibility in that moment. It all begins with the concept of intermittent reinforcement.
Intermittent reinforcement is the foundational behavioral mechanism driving the trauma bond. It operates on what psychologists call a variable ratio schedule of reward.
A variable ratio schedule.
Let's compare this to a secure dynamic. In a healthy relationship, affection, safety, and respect are predictable. Because they are stable, your brain's reward center, specifically the dopamine prediction error system, known as the VTNAC pathway, which connects the ventral tegmental area to the nucleus accumbens, settles into a calm, regulated baseline.
Let me use an analogy here because understanding the dopamine baseline changes everything.
Okay, go for it.
A healthy, secure relationship is like a vending machine. You walk up, you put in your dollar, you press A4, and you get your bag of chips. It happens every single time. It's reliable, it's comforting, and it sustains you. But you don't get addicted to a vending machine.
No, you don't.
You don't stand in front of it for 10 hours obsessively pressing A4 if you already have your chips.
Precisely. Because there is no prediction error for your brain to compute. You expected chips, you received chips. The dopamine release is minimal and stable.
But a toxic relationship, a trauma bond, is a slot machine. You put in your dollar, you pull the lever. Sometimes you get absolutely nothing, the silent treatment. Sometimes you get actively punished. They scream at you and devalue you. But sometimes, completely unpredictably, the bells ring, the lights flash, and you hit the jackpot. The love bombing returns. You get that perfectly tailored, intensely focused empathy.
And the neuroscience behind that slot machine effect is staggering. The mesolimbic dopamine pathway is specifically calibrated to compute reward prediction errors.
Okay.
When an experienced outcome far surpasses the brain's expectation, like suddenly receiving intense, passionate love after 3 days of cruel, terrifying devaluation, the resulting dopamine signal absolutely floods the nucleus accumbens.
It floods it.
This chaotic surge is mathematically and chemically far more intense than anything a stable, predictable, secure love can generate.
So your brain literally misinterprets that massive spike. It feels this chaotic, overwhelming rush of dopamine and codes this abusive relationship as true, epic love.
That is the dopamine side of the equation. It creates the obsessive craving and the pursuit. But we also have to look at the encoding of the attachment itself, which is where the trauma bond becomes deeply physically embedded.
And this involves a chemical cocktail of cortisol, oxytocin, and the endogenous opioid system.
Yes, it does.
I was reading the clinical data on the cortisol spikes during the devaluation phase, and it clicked for me. Cortisol is the stress hormone. When they are devaluing you, your body is literally in a state of terror.
Absolute terror.
You are hypervigilant, your fight or flight system is fully activated, but the paradox is that the only person who can soothe that terror is the person causing it.
Exactly. You are in a state of high cortisol panic. Then the abuser suddenly pivots and offers comfort or a meager apology. Your brain immediately releases a massive wave of oxytocin, the bonding hormone.
Wow.
This deeply biologically associates the abuser with profound safety and relief from the threat of death. You are bonding to the source of your terror because they hold the antidote.
But the sources go even further. They mention endogenous opioids.
Yes. During that intense moment of reconciliation, your body releases high concentrations of beta endorphins. These are natural painkillers.
Endorphins, okay.
The endogenous opioid system, specifically the mu-opioid and kappa-opioid receptors within the brain's reward circuits, is critical for adult pair bonding.
Wait, opioid receptors? As in the exact same neuroreceptors involved in a heroin or morphine addiction?
Yes. And this is a crucial point that the clinical research makes absolutely, unequivocally clear. A trauma bond is not a metaphor for addiction. It is pharmacologically an addiction analog.
That is heavy.
When the victim is separated from the abuser during the discard phase, they are not merely experiencing emotional grief over a breakup. They are experiencing actual physiological opioid withdrawal.
That is terrifying. They're going through withdrawal. No wonder the pain feels like it's tearing them apart. Their cells are screaming for the chemical fix.
And this withdrawal state is compounded by a neurobiological phenomenon called attentional capture, mediated by the locus coeruleus.
The what?
The locus coeruleus. It is a nucleus in the pons of the brainstem involved with physiological responses to stress and panic. Under the sustained, chronic threat of repeated betrayal and unpredictability in the relationship, it enters a state of tonic hyperarousal.
Like a permanent alarm.
Your brain's alarm system is permanently switched on, constantly scanning for threats and rewards.
Which means your prefrontal cortex, the logical, reasoning, planning, executive function part of your brain, is essentially taken offline.
You've lost executive control. Cognitive neuroscience experiments on attentional capture demonstrate that stimuli associated with unpredictable rewards will automatically, reflexively capture your visual and cognitive attention, entirely bypassing your higher-order goals and logic.
Bypassing logic entirely.
Your logical brain is saying, do not answer that text from your abuser. They will destroy you again. But your hijacked reward circuit, screaming in the agony of opioid withdrawal, physically forces your hand to pick up the phone and reply. The circuit operates entirely below the threshold of conscious override.
If you are listening to this and you have ever hated yourself for taking them back, or for missing them, or for staring at your phone waiting for them to text you after they destroyed your life, this is the existential truth you must absorb.
Yes, listen closely to this.
Craving someone who harmed you is not a moral failing. It is a biological hijacking of your evolutionary survival circuitry. Your body is doing exactly what millions of years of evolution programmed it to do when faced with inconsistent survival resources.
It is entirely biological. In fact, this neurochemistry hooks highly driven, intelligent, successful people just as easily as anyone else.
Really?
Sometimes even more so, because highly driven people are conditioned to push through pain and adversity to achieve a goal. They interpret the massive cortisol spike of the abuse not as a signal to flee, but as a signal to work harder, fix the problem, communicate better, and earn the dopamine hit of the relationship's baseline.
So, if we accept this reality, if the bond is a literal chemical addiction engineered by the abuser's primitive defense mechanisms and locked in by our own dopamine and opioid pathways, how does a person actually escape it? How do you break a trauma bond? Because you cannot negotiate with neurobiology.
You cannot just think your way out of a chemical dependency.
Yeah.
If we start on the surface level with observable behavior, the absolute gold standard for recovery is zero contact.
Right.
You remove the substance completely. But when you cannot go completely no contact, say because of a shared custody agreement for children or a mandatory workplace dynamic, the primary behavioral strategy is the gray rock method.
Now, we mentioned the gray rock discard earlier, where the narcissist uses coldness as a weapon to provoke you. But this is the victim using gray rock defensively.
Correct. As a survivor, you actively become as uninteresting, unresponsive, and emotionally neutral as a literal gray rock on the ground.
You just give nothing.
You give one-word answers. You discuss only the necessary logistics. You do not explain yourself. You do not defend your character against their false accusations, and you offer absolutely zero emotional data.
Because the goal here is the extinction of their behavior. You are deliberately starving the narcissist of their necessary supply. If they cannot get a rise out of you, if they cannot use you as a receptacle for their shame, they eventually get bored and look for a more volatile source of supply elsewhere.
But it is vital for survivors to understand the difference between gray rock and stonewalling.
What's the difference?
Stonewalling is a refusal to engage, turning your back, crossing your arms, leaving the room in a visible huff, or aggressively giving the silent treatment.
Okay.
Stonewalling still shows the abuser that they are controlling your emotional state. They still see that they're affecting you. Gray rock is entirely different.
Gray rock is neutral.
Gray rock is being physically present, answering the logistical question about a child's school schedule, but doing so with the emotional resonance of an automated bank teller. You are polite, brief, and entirely vacant.
But gray rock only manages the outward behavior to keep the abuser at bay. It doesn't fix the internal chemistry. Psychologically, for clinical recovery, how do you endure the withdrawal?
This is where structured, trauma-informed therapy becomes an absolute necessity. The literature points to a highly critical withdrawal window, specifically the 24 to 72 hours immediately following a breach of contact.
So the hours right after they discard you, or the hours right after you block their number, or even the hours after you successfully gray rock a Hoover attempt.
Yes. In that specific window, the dopamine and endogenous opioid systems are actively screaming for reconciliation. The addiction is demanding a fix. The variable ratio reinforcement schedule must be broken right then and there.
In that 72-hour window.
Every single time you survive that 72-hour window without making contact, You physically weaken the neural pathways of the trauma bond. You are allowing the receptors to downregulate.
But if you break,
But every time you break and text them back, you drop another coin in the slot machine and the neurological addiction resets to zero.
to survive that window, the sources highly recommend moving away from traditional talk therapy and towards somatic and trauma-focused therapies. We're talking about modalities like TFCBT, DBT, EMDR, and brain spotting.
Because traditional talk therapy often just keeps the survivor intellectualizing the trauma, which can actually keep the nervous system activated.
That makes sense.
These specialized therapies aim to fundamentally re-regulate the parasympathetic nervous system. DBT, for instance, focuses heavily on distress tolerance. It teaches the survivor how to sit inside a painful, agonizing emotional state without resorting to self-destructive behaviors, like calling the abuser for relief.
The sources also reference Dr. Judith Herman's foundational framework for complex trauma recovery, which outlines 3 nonlinear stages: safety, remembrance, and mourning, and reconnection.
Establishing safety has to come first. You
Yeah.
cannot heal in the environment that is actively making you sick. You cannot detox while the poison is still being administered. But once physical and psychological safety are established, the survivor enters the most profound and difficult phase: remembrance and mourning.
And on the existential level, this mourning phase is incredibly complex because you aren't just mourning the loss of a flawed human partner the way you would in a normal breakup.
No, you're not.
You are mourning the death of the avatar. You are grieving that perfect, bespoke soulmate created during the love bombing phase. You have to grieve a ghost. You have to metabolize the devastating reality that the person you fell in love with, the person who made you feel perfectly safe, never actually existed.
It is a profound, complicated grief. It is the death of an illusion. But moving through that grief is the only way to reach the final stage: reconnection.
Your connection with yourself.
This is the process of rebuilding the internal compass, the epistemic security and the self-trust that the abuser systematically dismantled. You reconnect with your own body, your own reality, and eventually with safe, healthy communities.
But I want to get really granular here for a second. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of someone in the thick of it. It's 2 a.m. You are in that 72-hour withdrawal window.
Right.
Your brain is literally screaming for that dopamine hit. You are staring at your phone, and you feel like you are going to die if you don't reach out to them. What is the exact cognitive or somatic anchor a person can hold onto in that exact terrifying moment?
The anchor in that moment is the radical acceptance of your own biology. When that wave of panic and craving hits, you must utilize distress tolerance skills, like paced breathing or even plunging your face into ice water to activate the mammalian dive reflex and force your heart rate down.
Change your physiology first.
You must lower the physiological panic first. And cognitively, you must accurately label the experience. You tell yourself, I am not craving this person because they're my soulmate. I'm not craving them because they're good for me. I'm experiencing a biological misfire. My dopamine and opioid receptors are in acute withdrawal. You anchor yourself in the undeniable scientific fact that the feeling is a chemical storm. And like all storms, it will eventually pass, provided you do not feed it.
That reframe changes everything. You separate your identity, your heart, and your worth from the neurochemical withdrawal. You stop judging yourself for being weak, and you start managing a physiological symptom.
You observe the craving without obeying it.
We have journeyed through some incredibly dark and complex territory today. Let's trace the arc of what we've uncovered. We started at the surface, lured in by the illusion of the shared fantasy, the Hollywood movie set built to hide an internal void.
Yes.
We moved through the invisible, deeply psychological warfare of the devaluation phase, where primitive defenses like splitting and projective identification forced you to carry the crushing weight of the abuser's toxic shame.
We covered a lot of ground.
We descended all the way down to the cellular level, exposing how the VTA enact dopamine pathways and opioid receptors hijack your evolutionary biology into a literal chemical addiction. And finally, we mapped the difficult but entirely possible path of somatic recovery, breaking the reinforcement schedule, and starving the cycle.
It is a comprehensive unmasking of the dynamics that thrive exclusively in the shadows of our awareness. And as we conclude, I want to leave the listener with one final, deeply existential realization about human nature and healing.
Please.
When survivors finally exit these relationships, they often spend years agonizing, desperate for closure, they want revenge, or they want a genuine apology, or they just want to find the perfect combination of words to finally make the abuser understand the immense pain they caused.
Right, they want to be heard.
But you have to let that go.
Yeah.
The primitive defense mechanisms of splitting, denial, and projective identification make true empathy and true accountability structurally impossible for the pathological mind.
Yeah.
They literally cannot process your pain without collapsing.
So if you can never get them to see the truth, and you can never get an apology, what is the victory?
The ultimate victory over psychological abuse isn't getting revenge. It isn't finally making them see the truth of what they did. The ultimate victory is reclaiming your autonomy.
Autonomy.
It is the profound, quiet realization that you are no longer an object in someone else's fragile, terrifying fantasy. You are the sole author of your own reality. The victory is that you walked through the fire, you survived the withdrawal, and you retained your humanity. You still have the capacity for true, secure, reciprocal love, and they remain trapped in their illusion.
You know, we started this deep dive by talking about how an X-ray gives a clean, binary answer and how psychological trauma is murky and confusing. But I think what we've discovered today is that once you understand the hidden architecture, the primitive defenses, the dopamine prediction errors, the projection of the avatar, the picture actually becomes incredibly clear.
It really does.
You finally see the wooden scaffolding holding up the fake movie set, and once you see the scaffolding, you never have to fall for the illusion ever again.
You finally learn to trust your own eyes and your own reality.
Thank you for joining us on this expedition. Take care of yourselves, trust your own perception, and we will see you on the next deep dive.